So today I'm going to be presenting primarily on FACSIAR's evidence how-to guides. So most of the content have come from these guides, and they are publicly accessible on our website. So you can go back and look at these guides and review them at your leisure. So I'm going to spend, so before I properly begin, I would like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land also, on which we are all meeting today. For me, it's the land of the Dark and Young people. So I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Okay, so today's session is going to be divided up into 4 critical sections, looking at evidence and evidence hierarchies, finding, quality research and evidence, conducting a search, and critical appraisal. So I guess just to give you a bit of context, these guides were developed back in 2017, and they were available at that time to what was then FACS staff, now DCJ. And last year they were updated, and they're now part of our Evidence Hub pages that are now publicly accessible. A lot of today's session, I am actually going to be focusing on research evidence. So that's not to deny the other types of evidence that we use in decision making, like client voice and also obviously staff expertise. But today I'm going to primarily look at the research evidence. And of that research evidence, I'm going to predominantly be looking at systematic reviews, RCTs, and meta-analyses. So I imagine a lot of you already are familiar with qualitative research and qualitative research techniques. So hopefully today's session will be some new information for you. And obviously we draw on a lot of research here in DCJ, but I guess where we're heading is looking at that high quality and robust evidence. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. Okay, so what is evidence? So evidence is information that comes closest to the facts of a topic, of a subject. It's information from high quality, methodologically appropriate research, and it is obviously used in evidence-informed decision making. And obviously, this is really helpful because we need to know what works, we need to know what works well, and we need to know what doesn't work, so that we can deliver good quality programs and services to the people we're working with in New South Wales. Okay, so how can I use evidence in my work? Now, just bear with me. I'm actually just going to put my timer on to make sure that I stick to time, because I can have a tendency to get a bit waffly. Okay, so how can I use evidence in my work? Evidence can help us to understand how to improve client outcomes. It can provide insight into existing programs and services that we deliver. It can be used to modify the programs that we have, and it also can help us to understand how clients experience our services, what their experiences are, and that's obviously a big part of that is qualitative research. So it's broadly accepted that there are 3 types of evidence. So they are best available research evidence, which enables researchers, practitioners, and policymakers to determine whether or not a program, practice, or policy is actually achieving the outcomes it aims to achieve and in the way it intends. So best available research evidence comes from a range of sources. It can be academic journal articles, published literature, statistics and data, and reports from government and non-government organisations. It can be qualitative or quantitative. As I said, I'm going to focus more on the quantitative side of things today because I think that's where we don't always have a lot of information. I can certainly say that before I came to FACSIAR, I didn't really know what a meta-analysis was. And I had only really read about randomized controlled trials in psychology journals during my social work degree, so it was pretty limited. So today I'm going to try and focus on that to give you a little bit more knowledge in that space. It's broadly accepted that the more rigorous a study's research design, the more compelling the research evidence is. So that's kind of the perspective we're coming from today. So experiential evidence, this is really important. This is based on the professional insight, understanding, skill and expertise that's accumulated over time. And sometimes it's referred to as intuitive or tacit knowledge. and contextual evidence. Now, this is about whether or not a program or a strategy fits with the context in which it's to be implemented. So this basically, this evidence gives us information about whether a strategy or program is feasible to implement, useful to implement, and likely to be accepted by a particular community. And I think it's this evidence type that we get a lot more evidence from our clients around what has worked for them, what is working for them, what are their experiences, and we can collect this through feedback, so seeking feedback, or surveys, more structured tools like surveys, interviews, and focus groups. So I also wanted to really stress here that evidence can vary in strength, quality, and appropriateness. So not every systematic review at that kind of top tier level evidence or RCT is good evidence. So that's where critical appraisal comes in, and that's what we're going to focus on at the end of the session today. Okay, so this is just showing that the three types of evidence used in decision making that I've just discussed, they're overlapping, they're interrelated. We need to rely on all three to be able to make good decisions in program and service delivery. And obviously, this is our decision making here in the center. So just here with my circle. Okay, so I've already touched a little bit on where evidence comes from. Generally, it's accepted that the highest quality research comes from journal articles and published literature and statistics and data. But again, not all published literature is high quality. So that's up to you then to decide what you rely on and what you don't rely on when you're in your work. So the other types of evidence is conference presentations, grey literature, interview surveys, expert opinion, and magazine and news articles. Okay, so now I just want to touch a little bit on quantitative research. Sorry, I'm just checking how we're going. Okay, so the most appropriate research design for a study depends on the research aims or questions. So not all research questions can be answered by quantitative research, and not all research questions can be answered by qualitative research. So generally, the strength of the quantitative approach is in its ability to provide insights about large numbers of people. So it generally tends to have a sample size that's larger than qualitative research. And because it's used very rigorous methods, it's quite confident in saying that this approach, this program is effective. So quantitative research is used when we want to know what works or which intervention is effective. It's not going to tell us clients' experiences of a program. It's not going to tell us a range of things, but it is going to tell us if a program is effective. And part of that is because of the large numbers of people that are studied. So a randomized control trial, a systematic review, a meta-analysis, or a quasi-experimental design might be appropriate here. Okay, so I've provided a little bit of a list here about the main quantitative research types. Some of these types are more common in the health and medical field. So the ones that I've commonly come across in social welfare, RCTs, quasi-experimental design, and the two bottom ones, the pre and post test and the time series or interrupted time series. So just to touch on an RCT, what it is and how it's done. I do apologise, I do have 3 children home, so you may occasionally hear a couple of yells or noises. The joys of homeschooling, my apologies. Okay, so an RCT is when people or participants of a study are randomly allocated to generally 2 or more groups. Generally it's 2. So you have a treatment group, which is the program you want to know more about. You want to know if this treatment group is effective, basically. And then you've got a control group. And this control group is just the services as usual. So then obviously you're comparing the 2 programs and seeing if this treatment program is effective. Quasi-experimental design is very similar to an RCT, except it doesn't involve random allocation or random assignment to the treatment or control group. So in an RCT, participants are randomly assigned to one of those two groups. In a quasi-experimental design, they are allocated. So it does have what's called greater bias because it doesn't have that random allocation to the groups. Pre and post test, it's pretty straightforward. Data is collected before the program begins and then after, and then obviously outcomes compared. And time series is a collection of observations, and it's obtained through repeated measurements over time. So these are probably the four main quantitative research types that you'll come across in your work. Moving on. Sorry, did I not show those slides properly? There it is. So RCT, quasi-experimental cohort studies, case-controlled pre- and post-test and time series. Okay. All right, qualitative and mixed methods research. The qualitative approach allows greater exploration of a topic. So it gives us that detailed, in-depth look as to client experience. Why do, example, as I've put here, why do parents tend to drop out of an intervention at an early stage? It gives us the data that can't be answered by quantitative research. Okay, I actually like to think that quantitative and qualitative research can go hand in hand. I think we can, I certainly know in my work currently, there's more and more studies and evaluations that I'm reading that's using both, which is called a mixed methods approach. So it's getting the data, it's using kind of quantitative strategies to analyze the data, but it also encompasses some qualitative elements too, particularly around client experience. So that's really important, and I think both are equally important. Now I've popped qualitative research into personal anecdote because it is generally a story or a subjective opinion of the people we work with. We're getting their opinion. If it's ethnographic research, it's the researcher's view and their observations. So I have actually popped down some qualitative research types here. So obviously ethnography, which is obtained observation and interviews, narrative, phenomenological, I knew I was going to struggle with that word, grounded theory, and case studies. So they tend to be the main qualitative research types that we see. Okay, so most of the time, a single study doesn't tell us enough about a program that we want to know more about. And we are more able to see the bigger picture when we look at reviews that have combined the results of many studies. And this is when we get a systematic review. So a systematic review is a type of research that looks at the results from all of the good quality studies. It puts together the results of all of these studies into one summary and then gives us a bit of an overview of what the treatment benefits and effects are. So whether this program is effective. Sometimes these reviews are actually, they do a meta-analysis. Now this is a little bit different to a systematic review. A meta-analysis is when they combine the results of more than one study, multiple studies, and they use that using a statistical analysis strategy. So it actually gives you a treatment effect based on the results of many, many studies on one topic. So in this sense, it's probably systematic reviews, meta-analyses, they are considered to be the gold standard in research, largely because they reduce the probability of being misled by looking at only one study. Now, I need to really emphasize here that not all systematic reviews are good reviews. In the last kind of 5 to 10 years, there's just been an upsurge of the number of systematic reviews out there, and they're not all good quality. So today I'll help you find the good quality systematic reviews, know where to find them, and be able to access them. Okay, so evidence hierarchy. So evidence hierarchies, I need to emphasize that this is kind of the view of FACSIAR and DCJ. As I said, we're increasingly trying to look at more robust studies and research to be able to inform our program design. That's not to discount other research types and strategies, but we are first and foremost try to look there and then look downwards, down that hierarchy. Need to probably reinforce that evidence hierarchies are very common in the health and medical field. They are a little less common within social policy, and that's largely because we don't always have a lot of systematic reviews and RCTs and quasi-experimental design in our field. So we need to look we need to look at more research to be able to get a picture about a program. Okay, so evidence hierarchies rank research based on the rigor of their research methods. I'm going to quickly go because I realise we are running a little bit low on time for this section. So obviously you can see here meta-analyses and systematic reviews at the top. So it's these sort of studies that can say it is shown that the program is effective, and obviously RCTs too in that. And then we get down to quasi-experimental studies. It is likely that this program is effective. Pre and post test studies, there are signs that this study is effective. So you can see as we go down the hierarchy, the definitiveness in which these research types can say that a program works decreases. So that's the hierarchy. This is FACSIAR's hierarchy. This is based on a number of other hierarchies that are out there that are available in the health and medical field. Now, just to kind of put this in context, I wanted to just quickly touch on some examples of evidence-based programs in New South Wales. So I've pulled out 6 that are used in the child welfare and out-of-home care space. So before I go through these, I'm just going to quickly show you . Okay, doesn't really want to do, there we go. I knew it was going to work. So this is an example of a rating scale. So when researchers rate a program, they rate it as well supported all the way down to harmful. Obviously, well supported studies are studies that have a large evidence base and high effectiveness. So they show that the program is effective. So whatever they're kind of studying. So in this case, I have used the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare, their ratings on our 6 programs that we have here in New South Wales. Now, as you can see here, the 2 programs that have the highest rating, Functional Family Therapy and Treatment Foster Care Oregon, so it's well supported. As you can see, these are programs that are supported by quite a lot of studies. So 9 RCTs, 2 quasi-experimental studies, and 1 pre and post-test study. And for Treatment Foster Care Oregon, 10 RCTs. So these programs have been around for a really long time. There's been a long time to be able to develop the evidence base and conduct 10 RCTs, 2 quasi-experimental designs. So obviously they've been given this rating because of not only the quality of the research, but also the extent of the research. There's quite a lot of research that's being done for these 2 programs. So I might move on. Okay, so sometimes demand emerges for evidence in new areas of social policy or program design before the evidence base has developed sufficiently. So in these cases, you need to ask yourself what other policy areas or disciplines have faced similar challenges, and how do other countries or jurisdictions address this problem or topic. So this means you're going to have to look at other types of research evidence. You're not going to have systematic reviews, meta-analyses, RCTs, quasi-experimental design. You're going to have to look at the qualitative research, the case studies, the expert opinion, and the grey literature. So this is where this other evidence is also really important when it's an emerging demand. It's something that's new, that hasn't existed before, and this is going to give us a little bit more of a direction of where to go with program design. Okay, so we might actually take some questions now because we're at the end of this section. Do we do this through the chat, Rosalita?
Totally up to you, Katie.
Okay, do we want to do it through the chat, or do we want anyone to ask a question? I can take a couple of questions now and then maybe at the end. You'll have to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question though.
I will. It's Margaret from Westia, of course. Also, just remember us that we're the only funded DCJ NGO that does research and evaluation. You should use us a bit more. But my question is on those functional family therapies and the Oregon, the evidence that used to support those programs, are they all overseas-based evidence, or because I know they're fairly, really in the scheme of things, they're fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any Australian studies yet on those programs, apart from the data?
No, so the answer is no. So unfortunately, a lot of that high quality evidence that we do have is US based. And obviously that has huge problems for fidelity of program implementation here, because programs that are suitable in the US for the US populations are not necessarily suitable for our context. So here I'm talking specifically too about our Aboriginal populations and how suitable some of these programs are. And also our multicultural, our cultural diversity too. It's completely different than the US. So the answer to that is no. We currently have a trial of treatment foster care Oregon undergoing New South Wales at the moment. Because of the small number of participants in the trial, there won't be an RCT, but there will be an evaluation looking at outcomes. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of Australian-based RCTs, but it is emerging. It is absolutely emerging, and there's more and more researchers and organisations that are wanting to do that high quality, robust evidence. Any other questions? Did that answer your question, Margaret?
It did, thank you. And I know that the functional therapies, when I went to the introductory meeting, because I think I met you there, was that a couple has made comments that we felt they need some cultural context. And I know that since they introduced it, they have done some of that in Australia. So I was pleased to see that it was adaptive.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? We might just take one more and then move on.
There is a question in the chat, Katie, that says, what are your assumptions underpinned by the hierarchy? I'm not entirely sure what that means. Maybe if the person who asked it wants to add anything.
Do you want to ask and add anything? I'm not quite sure either.
It just seems to me that the quantitative method for your department, which is essentially a relational kind of department, I don't see it as a so there must be some assumptions underpinning why the DCJ thinks that randomized control trials are way better than qualitative methods. If I say to you that if you ask me about the program and I say to you it's not working for me, you will consider that as the bottom of the rung in evidence?
So no. So I think, as I mentioned, I'm actually a social worker in my background. I value qualitative research very highly. I think client voice, client experience is so incredibly important. For me, I think mixed methods is important, because I think qualitative research doesn't necessarily tell us that a program works, but it does tell us about client experience. So if you've got a program that's meeting all the outcomes and is working, but only 10% of clients say they actually enjoyed the program, then I think you'd really have to reevaluate whether that program is suitable or what you could change about it. So maybe doing some further research with the participants, with the people that have been part of the program, to find out, well, what did they like and what didn't they like, and modifying the program from there. So I'm certainly not of the view that one is more important than the other. I think they're all important, but I think they serve different purposes. Does that answer your question?
Sure, but doesn't that mean that the hierarchy then is just a wrong way to view things?
Well,
shouldn't it be a little bit more flatter?
Possibly, but
political?
I think in historically we haven't always used that high quality evidence, and when I think we're just trying to get people to think more about using it in their work, so not just dismissing it. It's one aspect of evidence-based decision making. It's one aspect that you're using, as well as client voice, client experience, and also your experience and your expertise. So it's one aspect. And obviously, as I said, best available research evidence, it's your RCTs, it's your systematic reviews, it's your qualitative research as well. So we're using it all. We're using it all to build a picture about what works for our clients, what programs work and what's effective. So as I said, I've taken the approach I have today because I think a lot of people joining us today, they're already familiar with qualitative research and qualitative strategies, and a lot of people are doing that in their work, but they don't know necessarily about this other side of the best available research evidence. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken, and obviously I'm using our how-to guides that are very focused in this way as well. All right, we might move on because I realise we're running out of time. We've got a lot to get through. So this next section is going to look at where you can find quality research and evidence. Where do I look? How do I do a search? And how can I do it when I have limited time or resources? Okay, so you can find a number of DCJ published reports here. So it's the FACSIAR publications, and if you're looking at crime-related research, you can look at BOXAR. So obviously FACSIAR has child, family, housing, homelessness research. Research databases and electronic collections. So these databases, I'm not going to read them all out. These are the best places to start. Some of you may be working in large organisations or councils or other government departments, and so you may have access to a workplace or academic library. So in that case, great. If you don't, if you work for a smaller organisation, then you can try Google Scholar. I will outline a quick caveat that often you can do a Google Scholar search, but not all the articles that you find are going to be free to access. And there's sometimes they're extremely expensive, some journal articles, and you have limited access for only a few days. So just to bear in mind that even when you do a search on Google Scholar, it's not always going to give you full text articles and the full PDF. Obviously, you can get the full PDFs if they're open access, okay? So that's where open access comes in. Open access is increasing around the world. They still need to go through a QA and peer review process to, to meet a threshold of credibility. And I have listed a whole lot of options here to search for open access articles. So this is at no cost to you. So you can access one of these, either journals or the Directory of Open Access Journals, Open Access Australasia, PubMed and ERIC, and some of the articles, the journals there to access free text and open journals. So that means they're free, you'll get the full PDF, and you can often download them and save them. So the other place you could be looking is just doing a Google search, and that's going to give you organisational documents, grey literature, government, non-government. So obviously when you're doing a Google search, it really varies in quality and in relevance to your topic. And obviously you need to ask a lot of questions around who has written it, who has published it, is it trustworthy, when was it updated, is it outdated, is it current? So I recommend these tips. So looking for websites ending in .edu or .ac, so that will give you educational institutions, .asn, .gov or .govt, so that's New Zealand, and .org. So if you have a look and you kind of apply this strategy, you're more likely to find quality grey literature, quality research. So this is some other useful websites. I'm not going to go through them. We're going to make this available to you. So obviously Boxar, AFES, PRC, AIHW, APO, Ahuri, they're probably the big Australian ones to look at. And then I've included a UK and a US. Now, before we move on, I did want to quickly show you our resource centre, where you can find a lot of information, including statistics, and they're publicly accessible. So as you can see, here's our Family and Community Services Insights, Analysis and Research pages. We've got publications, we've got the Pathways of Care longitudinal study resources, our evidence hub, and that's where these resources, the how-to evidence guides, are located. And I can quickly show you the evidence hub. So there's evidence reviews and summaries, how-to guides. There's an evaluation repository that isn't yet available, so that's happening as we speak. And our publications and gap maps, evidence and gap maps. So you can find a lot of information there as well. So I've talked a little bit about systematic reviews today. So where can you find systematic reviews? And obviously, the more recent, the better. So anything in the last 1 to 2 years is generally considered up to date and a thorough examination of a topic or a program. So the best sources of systematic reviews, Campbell Collaboration, Cochrane and Epicenter. I would actually say that Cochrane's a little bit more health medical focused. So I think definitely for our work, the Campbell Collaboration is the best. Has a lot on social welfare programs, homelessness, foster care, and other child welfare. So it is really, really useful. Evidence and gap maps. So I'm not sure whether you know much about evidence and gap maps, but they are interactive tools. So it's actually a map, and they're designed to help us to use research to, easily identify evidence of what works and to identify any gaps. So they don't synthesize research. They're not like a systematic review, and that synthesizes the research and pulls together, the evidence of what works and what works about a program. This is actually just all of the studies pulled together in a map. So here is our, just go back. Well, I'll mention this one because it is having problems here. This is the UK Centre for Homelessness Impact. They have a gap map on effectiveness of homelessness interventions. So I've used that a little bit in my work. Sorry, it's just a bit glitchy here for some reason. Just doesn't want me to here. Okay, just doesn't want me to go on that. This is the Out of Home Care Evidence and Gap Map. This is on our Evidence Hub pages. So this has been updated. So I'm going to click on this just to quickly show you. So it is a map, and it obviously has interventions down the side here. At the top, there are the outcome domains, and then we've got systematic reviews in the green bubble and primary studies in the yellow. So if I click on the yellow, it will give me all of the articles, all of the research for carer training and support with the outcome of health. So I can click on this and it will take me to the journal article. Now, obviously, if your organisation doesn't have, as I mentioned, access to a workplace library or databases, you won't be able to often see the full PDF. In this case, for us, we're lucky. I've just clicked on a, oh no, I haven't. So see, you have to pay for it. So not a great idea. But it does give you a lot of information just on this page about the study. So it gives us the background, the abstract, the methods, and the results. Okay, and the findings. So just sifting through the abstract can often tell you whether this article, this study it will be useful for your purpose. Okay. All right. Okay, formulating a search strategy. Okay, does anyone have any questions from that section and where to find information?
There aren't any questions in the chat, Katie.
Lovely. We might move on. Okay, so a search strategy. So a search strategy is really going to help you to find what you're looking for. So it will give you some structure to your information seeking and also give you a checklist for steps to work through. So I've got a quick video.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct. In this video, we're going to look at how to turn your research question into a search strategy. First, ensure you have a well-constructed research question. This will be a question that has a clear objective and is neither too specific nor too broad in scope to address. Our example question is about the impact of policies to tackle water pollution in the UK. You first need to identify the key concepts in the question. We have highlighted our key concepts in red. They are policies, water pollution, and UK. Now you can fit your key concepts into the concept model. We have done this for the 3 concepts in our example question. The next stage is thinking up as many synonyms as possible for your concepts. Try to think of other terms which may have been used by authors discussing the topic. For example, UK could also be referred to as United Kingdom and Great Britain, amongst others. By including these keywords in your search, you are making your search as broad as possible and capturing as many papers as you can on the topics you're researching. To improve your search, you can use techniques such as truncation and wildcards. You can use the question mark to search for words which may or may not have a certain letter in them. For example, using the question mark in place of the U in colour allows us to search for the American spelling as well as the British one. The hash symbol replaces a definite but variable character. Using it in the word organisation allows us to find it spelled with an S or a Z. Make sure you include abbreviations, for example, UK and United Kingdom. Using an asterisk in the place of the end of the word allows you to find all the different possible endings of that word. For example, if you type POLLUT asterisk, you will find pollution, polluting, pollutant, pollutants, and so on. For a comprehensive search, you need to group your keywords together. You can use OR to combine similar search terms, and then use AND to combine the different concepts at the end of your search. In some databases, such as Medline, you need to enter your search terms into the database one by one and select the ones that you want to combine at the end. However, in other databases, such as Web of Science, you can enter the whole search string into the search box in one go. If you need more help, the Researcher at Library Literature Searching web pages will guide you through the literature searching process step by step.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so there's one of 2 ways that you can actually develop a search strategy. So the one that they spoke about in the video, which is pulling out the main concepts from your research question and then linking keywords and synonyms to use in your search. So you have your concepts and your keywords and synonyms. And the second is using the Pico model, which is from the health and medical field. So this model is very similar to the previous one, except you're looking at population. So who is your population? Intervention, which intervention are you considering or want to know more about? Comparison, and outcome. So what outcome or outcomes are you hoping to achieve? So this is just a little bit of an overview of what your search strategy in conducting a search will look like. So obviously you need to identify the research question or problem, develop your search strategy, identify the search terms, breaking down the question and including synonyms and alternate spelling, testing out your search terms, conducting your search, so making sure that you use connectors and truncation to refine your search so you don't get too many or irrelevant content, and then documenting the results of the search. So a lot of researchers use endnotes to document their search results. I just use a Word document. I would include not just the article title and author and year and obviously which journal or publication it's from, but also the abstract. So when you go back to look at it, you can see the relevance of the information. So now I actually wanted to do a bit of a search using Google Scholar. So the problem is, example problem, a service provider has been working with an increasing number of young people in out-of-home care with very complex behaviours leading to placement breakdown and offending behaviours. They want to know more about programs that have been effective with this cohort. So here's my question. Oh, I'm being interrupted. Sorry, can you hold on a minute? I'm so sorry. Yes. I'm so sorry about that. I think the babysitter, the 12-year-old, has exited the room. So, okay, so I've broken down my question. What programs are effective for young people in out-of-home care with emotional difficulties and complex behaviours? So breaking it down into 4 concepts: programs, young people, out-of-home care, emotional difficulties and complex behaviours. And obviously you can see there I've thought about some other words that could be used. So programs in the UK, they might use programs with double M, interventions, young people, teenagers, adolescents, and then a range of words that are used to describe out-of-home care in other jurisdictions, and obviously added delinquency to our search. I've also broken this down using the Pico model as well. So I'm not actually doing any research, so I don't need a comparison group. So it's not necessarily to use all 4 arms of the Pico model. So in this example, I'm just going to use population, intervention and outcomes, so PO. And again, you can see I've got the same synonyms and alternative spelling and other things in that section as well. So here is my search string. So I've used OR to connect young people, adolescent and teen. I have used the asterisk to search for variations. So I'm going to get adolescent, adolescents, teen, teenager, teenagers, teens, complex behaviour, both spelling US and Australian, UK, and delinquent, delinquency, program, programs, programming, and interventions. So, and I've also used AND to connect all of these terms. So not all databases you use the inverted commas. Some require you to use parentheses, but for Google Scholar, this search will work okay. Okay, so here is my search. I have just run the search. I can show you, work you through it, but this is a screenshot of the search I did last week. So I got 6,170 results of programs for this cohort. So that's a lot. It's a lot to work through. So not all of it's going to be relevant. So what I'm going to do is I'd limit the search by date. So you see here I've limited the search over a 10-year period. I could even refine it even more and just look at the last 5 years. And so that's almost half the search results. So if you like, I can actually show you the search. Just bear with me. So sorry about this. I have 3 children at home, homeschooling, not doing much homeschooling right now. Okay, so let's just run this search. Okay, so I'm going to go into Google Scholar. Sorry. Okay, all right, I'm going to run my search. So I'm just going to quickly leave that up. I won't be a moment. Okay, so not all of these results are going to be relevant. Obviously, some are going to be more relevant than others, and that's when critical appraisal comes in. So what I often do is I look at the first few pages and then I jump to the end, because the relevance of the article diminishes as the pages go on. So I might jump to the end to see what other articles are popping up, but I generally go through the first few pages very thoroughly, and just to make sure I've exhausted all the programs that I really want to look at, that I'm interested in. Okay, so does anyone have any questions now about doing a search?
Katie, I don't have a question. It's Anna here, but I know that you're focusing on what you're doing. I just want to let you know that there's a lot of support for you in the chat at the moment. So there's no need to apologize. Everybody thinks you're doing a fantastic job. Don't get flustered.
I'm getting a bit flustered. It's,
yeah, no, I feel like your child is expressing my inner world, just in general.
You wouldn't believe what my child's asking me. He's asking me if he's allowed to have a cupcake. Like, it's so insignificant right now. It's just going to eat the whole packet.
Have the cupcake.
He was very sweet. The second interruption was checking. There was one left, and he was checking, do you want it? Are you sure I can? So it was very sweet. So thank you for your support, everyone. It was
it's all good.
A challenge running a webinar with 3 children at home and no other adult present. Okay, any questions?
There's none that I can see in the chat, Katie, but it's difficult to see with all of the messages that are supporting you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Look, as I said, you're going to get these slides, so you can just kind of explore these pages at your leisure as well. And I mean, it's fairly straightforward. And you know, if you feel like the results are a bit iffy, just keep running them, running some different terms, running them until you feel like it's, you know, it's adequate, you're getting adequate results. So you might need to change a few things. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I've run this search. It might have been about 6 times, because Google Scholar doesn't always accept some of the truncation that our databases do. So for example, there's another form of truncation you would have seen in the video with the question mark. So you can kind of put it in the middle of a word. So for example, I could have put behavior and replace what would normally be the U in our behavior spelling with the question mark, so it could pick up US and UK spelling. But Google Scholar doesn't seem to accept that truncation, and it does accept the asterisk truncation sometimes. So you kind of have to work with it a little bit. So it's about trial and error. And at the end of the day, you're not going to do anything wrong. Just give it a go, run your searches. You might need to test terms and test terminology out. But at the end of the day, you could end up with 3,000 articles that you can look through at your leisure. Who has time to look through 3,000 articles, right? Okay, so how are we going for time? Wow, we've still got a bit of time left, so that's good. Okay, so you have identified your research question or problem. You've developed your search strategy using either the concept system or the Pico model. So either one would work okay, depends on preference, I guess. You've conducted your search. You've decided which articles you want to review more thoroughly, and what's next. So what's next is probably the most critical part of this, and it's the critical appraisal part, the looking at what you've got and whether you want to use it. And you're really looking at whether or not it's good enough quality to rely on it with your program design or working with your communities and your clients. So critical appraisal is the systematic evaluation of a research paper to identify flaws and determine the quality of the evidence. So you're looking at 4 things. You're looking at validity and rigor, you're looking at credibility, looking at generalizability, and you're looking at usefulness and relevance to your organization, your practice, your program, your topic. So there's a number of critical appraisal tools that are available. Some of them are very high level that are used by academic researchers to review systematic reviews. Probably the least technical is this one. So the Critical Appraisal Skills Program Checklist. There's 8 guides to evaluate different types of research studies. So systematic reviews, RCTs, qualitative research. So it really is, oh, why did that happen? I didn't press click, try and go back. It really is probably the most basic and easy to use of the 3. And is it going to click on it for me? There we go. So this is the Casp checklist. So as you can see, there's a lot there. A lot of them are not relevant to us and the social welfare system. So obviously the ones that would be relevant would be the RCT, the systematic review, and the qualitative studies checklist. So they're really useful. The other 2 are much more for academic researchers. So one is the Prisma Checklist. It's a 27-item checklist designed to assist in reviewing a systematic review or meta-analysis. So it's quite high level. And the Amstar Checklist, again, it's mainly used by academic researchers and Cochrane, and it's again to review systematic reviews. So if a study has checked off all 11 on the checklist, then that means it's a really good high quality systematic review. I was supposed to come up with a picture, but some of it's glitching for some reason. Okay, it's not giving us our pictures. Okay, so if I don't tend to use the 3 checklists when I critically appraise an article, I use these 7 questions. So these are the 7 critical questions you need to explore when you're appraising an article. So you want to look at whether the aims are clearly stated, whether the methodology is appropriate, whether there's clear criteria in participant selection, whether the methods are explicit, whether they're systematic, they're reproducible. Are there any biases reported? So that's really important. And do the findings actually answer the research questions? Sometimes you find that there's a piece of research and the findings just don't marry up with the questions. So that's a big one. That would not be a high quality article or study. And the last one is, are the findings and conclusions, are they grounded in the data? Is it clear that they've drawn these findings and conclusions from the results? So they're the 7 questions that you need to ask. So what I've actually done is I've actually critically appraised an article for you. So I work predominantly in the child welfare, out of home care, and I also do a little bit of housing and homelessness work as well. So obviously Treatment Foster Care Oregon, it's a current trial that New South Wales, that's currently being delivered in New South Wales. So I've recently written a paper, I've been involved in writing a paper on Treatment Foster Care Oregon. And so I decided to look at this. And this was also one of the results that came up in our search, okay? So it's kind of connected. So I've pulled out this article, it was in our search, and it is a little bit older now, it's 8 years old, but it's still relevant, and it's still obviously one of the articles that's relied upon to give treatment foster care Oregon the rating that it has. Okay, so sorry, I have someone at the door making squeaky mouse noises, so my apologies. Okay, so maybe if I ignore, it will, they will go away. Okay, so are the aims research questions clearly stated? So yes, they are. The aims are clearly stated in the introduction and in the section of the article titled The Present Study. So basically there are two aims in this particular research. So this research is looking at, if I go back, it's looking at depressive symptom trajectories among girls in the juvenile justice system. And it's a randomized controlled trial of multidimensional treatment foster care, which is now called Treatment Foster Care Oregon. Okay, so the program hasn't changed, just the name. So the two aims of the study was to test the effects of multidimensional treatment foster care on depression trajectories. And the second was to examine the impact of baseline risk factors. So that's including depression, delinquency, physical harm, sexual harm on depression trajectories. So looking at the impact of those things and whether they impacted on the effects, moderated the intervention effects of the program. Okay, so the methodology, it's obviously a randomized controlled trial. Sorry, can you just bear with me one moment? Sorry. Apparently, babysitter's back, but not doing a great job. I might actually have someone on my lap in a minute joining in. Okay, so it's an RCT. There are 166 participants in this RCT. They were randomly assigned to the treatment group, which is the multidimensional treatment foster care group. So 81 in that group, and 85 girls received the, services as usual care. Okay, so 81 in the treatment group and 85 in the control group. So to me, this is a clear methodology. It's got a large sample, so I think it's appropriate to answer these questions. So are there clear criteria in participant selection? So yes, there is very clear criteria. So, oops, sorry, just go back. The girls had been mandated to community-based out-of-home care due to chronic delinquency. All the referred girls in the program aged 13 to 17 years who had at least one criminal referral in the previous 12 months and were placed in out-of-home care within 12 months following the referral were enrolled in the trial. So any girls that did not meet this criteria or were pregnant at the time were excluded. So it's pretty clear criteria as well. So I marked them as a tick at meeting that criteria as well. So for the analytical methods, yes, they are explicit, systematic, and reproducible. So the study uses a form of statistical modelling known as hierarchical linear modelling. It is a regression-based analysis. It's a common method that's used in a common statistical method used in studies. It basically looks at analysing variance, and that's when the predictor variables are at varying hierarchical levels. So please don't ask me how to do hierarchical linear modelling. I'm not a statistician, but what I do know is that it is a method that can be easily reproduced. So if I was to run this study all over again with 166 girls at the same cohort and I use the same statistical methods, then I would get the same findings. If it's the same group, the same data, the same analytical methods used, I will get the same results. So that's the question of reproducibility. Okay, is there any bias? So no, I didn't identify any biases in the article, but the researchers do note a number of limitations. So the sample was selected for delinquency and not depression. So only 1 in 5 participants actually reached the clinical depression cutoff at trial. So that means that the findings may not be generalizable to girls with more complex mental health disorders or mood disorder diagnoses. The study showed a random difference in baseline levels of depressive symptoms. So that meant that the treatment group, so the girls that received the multidimensional treatment foster care or treatment foster care Oregon program, they actually had higher mean depressive scores at baseline than the other group. Now, I don't actually see this as a huge problem. If this had been a quasi-experimental design where there wasn't the random allocation of girls to either the treatment group or the control group, then I would think this would be a huge bias. But because they were randomly assigned, I think this is not a huge issue of concern. The other issue that they identified was that the symptoms was, the measurement of symptoms was limited to self-report. So it wasn't through clinical tests or clinical observations, it was a self-reporting. And the other big issue, which is probably the most relevant in the Australian context. So while there was ethnic and racial diversity in the sample, the results may not be generalizable to populations in other settings. So this means that it might not, these findings might not be generalizable in the Australian context with our, with our community and with our community needs. So the other thing is, oh my goodness, sorry. It is, I'm going to let you guys have a look at this for a minute.
So this might be an opportunity for those of us who need to have a little stretch or take a breath or move around in your seats just while we're waiting. Give Katie an opportunity to settle her charges, as it were. Thank you all for your kind words in the chat. I'm not surprised by it, but it is lovely to read all of the support. She's back. Deep breath,
Sorry.
Katie. You're doing a great job.
Doing my head in. 9
It's
weeks
okay.
and counting. Okay, I'm very, very sorry for the interruptions.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all
Thank
good.
you for your support and understanding. So where were we? We were up to 6. So do the findings answer the original research questions? So yes. So they found that girls in the treatment group, so they either received the program, they experienced decreases in depressive symptoms across 2 years compared to the control group. So there was a decrease in symptoms. So they found that participants with more depressive symptoms benefited most from the program. And they also found that there was modest support for the direct effect of maltreatment on depression, but no support for its moderating role on the effect of the program. Okay. And number 7 is, yes, the findings, the results, the discussions, they're thorough, they're reflective of the results and the analysis. So overall, I would have rated this, this study quite highly. So it ticked all my 7 questions. Okay, how are we going? Okay, so we've got a bit of time. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to do, I actually pulled out, so not just the article I appraised, but I also pulled out a second article that came up in my search. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of a comparison. So I'm not suggesting that the second article isn't useful, because I certainly know I would read it, I would praise it, I would look at it, but I just wanted to show you some things to look out for. So obviously they're published very similar timeframes within 2 years of each other, so 2013 and 2015. Now, as you can see, I've actually written down the citations. So the article that I appraised had been cited by 58 researchers, and the other article had been cited by 16. Now, this is not always reliable, but often I have a look at the citations, because I think when an article is cited by a number of people, that it's more likely to be reliable evidence. Not always, but it is a little bit of an indication to show that it might be useful to read and to have a look at. So definitely have a look. When you go into Google Scholar, I might be able to pull up my search again. It will show you how many citations the article has had. So obviously they're two studies with two different kind of methodologies. So one was an RCT with 166 people, randomized 81 to the treatment group and 85 to the control group. Now, the second study I found was a mixed methods approach using a randomized design with a focus on qualitative inquiry. So what I found with the second article is the only thing that I noticed about it that was randomized was the 14 participants were randomized into either the treatment group or the control group, so 7 into each. So that was the only aspect that I noticed. For the most part, it seemed to be quite a qualitative piece of research. And it was quite interesting. So it did cover a lot about experiences with the program. So, but that's just some things to, I guess, look out for, looking at the number of citations and the number of in the sample is really important too. So obviously the greater the number here, the more reliable, generally reliable the findings are. Not always though. And that's where your critical appraisal comes in. So these are our how-to guides that I've used a lot today. So what is evidence? What is an evidence hierarchy? Finding quality research and evidence, assessing the quality of evidence, common social policy research methods. And I've actually thrown 3 additional ones in. So what is evaluation, key statistical terms, and reading and creating tables and graphs. The other one, which Katie Blair, my colleague in TEI, she's been part of developing. It has a lot of really useful information about evidence too. So using evidence in targeted early intervention. Okay, so we have whipped through that with plenty of time. So I guess we have some time for questions now.
There are a couple of questions in the chat, Katie. So the first one is asking about where people can actually find the number of citations. Would you be able to bring up your search to show people? Yeah.
Sure. Let me bring that up. Okay, so does everyone see my screen? See how it says cited by 9, cited by 7? Can you see all that? Cited by 89, cited by 62. So that's where you're going to find that information. And sometimes there's limited citations because it's a 2021 article as well. So you have to weigh up that as well. So obviously articles that have been around for a lot longer are going to have more citations than a more recently published article.
You can also click on the hyperlinks that Katie's hovered over, so it will actually show you the papers that have cited it too. So if you had time and you were looking for a number of papers on a specific topic, that's a good way to actually find papers that have cited other papers that might be useful in your searches.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Katie.
So another question we have is, how can we manage the volume of results that are thrown up by Google Scholar? If it's in the thousands, how realistic is it to conduct the review based on the limited time people have?
Okay, so as I said, focus on those first few pages. You can refine it even more by date. So if I go back to my search, I can custom range it. So I could even say 6 since 2017. So it's going to give me 1,500. So the more limits you put on your search, the less you're going to have, right? So, and as Katie said, that if I find a really great article that's really everything that I wanted, it's like great, then sometimes going into who else has cited it is going to give you more research, exactly what you want. Any other questions?
So the next question we have is, how would an organization go about purchasing access to a workplace library / database, and which one?
Oh, okay. So I can't answer that question because I'm not a librarian. I can flag that if you like, and I can ask our knowledge manager who's oversees our library. Basically, we use EBSCO in DCJ. So we use the EBSCO database, And so similar to the search that I ran in Google Scholar, you can run similar searches. It's a little bit more sophisticated. There's more limits you can put on your search. So I could search by peer-reviewed journal articles only, full text only. I can put greater limits on my search so it can refine my search even more. Google Scholar isn't as sophisticated. So I can certainly flag that. I know that it is quite expensive. So I know that it's, yeah, maybe in the thousands and thousands of dollars per year for us to have that EBSCO database access, but I can certainly follow that up.
I think as well, the free databases that you mentioned earlier, Katie, are really useful. Same with the Campbell collaboration and Cochrane. I think before you invest too much time researching a paid platform to go to, explore the free ones first, because most of them are really, really useful as well. Absolutely.
And because you need to really weigh up how much you're going to use it. So obviously DCJ is a really huge organization. A lot of people access the resources. We've got researchers, we've got policy people, program people, and even practitioners access our EBSCO database. So there's thousands of people that potentially can access. So we get our money's worth. So absolutely, I think you need to try some of those websites I gave you first and foremost, the open access journals and the open access databases, and the also, you know, some of our organisations within Australia, like Ahuri, they publish a lot of great research, PRC, AIFS, AIHW. So you can often find a lot there.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions?
There's also been not a question, but there's a couple of suggestions in the chat as well that if you're an alumni, some unis will actually give you access to their library or to databases. So that could be a useful avenue to explore as well.
Absolutely.
And maybe even your local library too. I know there are some, like local public library, they also might have access to some databases, I guess, that you could use too.
Yeah.
Can I just mention something, Katie? It's Rose Thompson from Churches Housing. I've spent most of my career in the university sector. Wherever are an alumni, you can still go in and have a chat with your university librarian, even if they don't give you access to the databases. They'll all be willing to talk you through how to think about approaching your searches, and they'll also talk you through, I think RMIT has actually got something up about accessing through Google Scholar on their website, under their library website. So you can look around those spaces and they'll most often get you. And I know RMIT has a YouTube clip up on accessing a video about Google Scholar. So there's lots of help there if you just go and bang on a few doors.
Thank you. Yes, no, that's right, Rose. You can find something somewhere. I guess that's the point, whether it's through workplace database, academic, or whether you're using the free options that we've talked about today, you will be able to find what you need. Any other questions, Katie?
There's just more recommendations from people about talking to their local university library and stuff. So if anybody doesn't have the chat open, please pop it open, because there are some good ideas that people are posting in there. And there's one question that's just been posted that says, with the evidence repository, will you be accepting recommended papers from us as providers?
So it's actually an evaluation repository. So it's actually capturing all evaluations that we've either commissioned or been part of, and you'll be able to access that. So that is forthcoming. It's currently being worked on by some members of my team. And yeah, so absolutely let us know, flick some things my way. Obviously, at the moment, it's a lot of the research evaluations that we know about and that either we've commissioned or been a part of. So absolutely, get in contact with me. You've got my contact. That would be great.
It's Margaret here, Katie from Worcester again. One issue we had, and we were able to pass an article on to a journal published article on research that we'd done. But what we found was, if once we submit an article to a journal, and in many cases want to use it, we can't. We have to pay $3,000, was one of them, to actually use our own article. So just be warned if ever you do use research. We were able to distribute it on a very discretionary basis, and the department did ask us, but just be warned, you can do such a good product that you've got to pay to use it back.
One trick that I've had to do in the past from back when I was working in academia as well is once your paper has actually been published in whatever journal it's in, you can actually take all of the text that's in it, I guess, and put it in your own document so it's not branded by the actual journal, and then you can distribute that rather than the branded version, because that's where you'll come into like copyright issues and stuff. So that's what I've done in the past.
I know, but you shouldn't, because the article we had to sign a whole lot of waivers to have it. And that's the problem, because I reckon this sector would have some great research content out there of practice wisdom, but just be warned.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Margaret.
So I have to just cue, I have a note, a reminder note, just reminding me to cue the NCOSS team to launch the feedback poll. We've taken off, speaking of evidence and data, we are collecting feedback now. There you go, the poll's up. Are there any other questions, comments that we've missed while people are doing that?
So I'm very mindful we have whizzed through some very complicated content. So hopefully you guys can have a look at a lot of this content in your own leisure too, and fiddle, work things out and have a go. But hopefully it's just provided a bit of a basis as to where to go to find information, how to do it, and then how to review it, basically.
There's a question that's just come up in the chat box as well, which is either with your DCJ sort of FACSIAR hats on, or also Katie's with the academic hats on. We've had a question that's come up from Kate Pedersen about accessing support to get quantitative research and high quality qualitative research done on programs and within our sector, and in particular here, young people. You know, Katie's looking to get research. Is she there with young people using a participatory approach to inform applications for funding? Any tips?
Wow. Okay, I'm just reading the question now. Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add? Do you want to unmute yourself and add anything to your question?
I can't see her. Is she here?
Yep, so that's me. Sorry. Yep. Hi.
Hi. All these Kates and Katies and
I'm actually Steph, but someone's changed my name on here. One of my staff.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we're a group that is going, like, we've lobbied our local MP, and he has said, yep, I agree, we need to do some research because our young people are really disconnected and nothing's really grabbing. So as a collective, we said, yep, great, let's do some research around this. So I've contacted ACU and Uni of Western Sydney to say, hey, we need to find out what the young people are experiencing, thinking, and think that they want. Like, we want to bring them in that research way, because we really believe that's relevant for this community and for young people. But I'm going through the kind of the placement coordinators, and they say, yeah, we'll put it out there, but it all feels like a black hole to me.
Come to Westia, we're TEI funded to research you.
Okay.
Like I did want to say, but that's what we've been around for 40 years, and we're still trying to have to sell ourselves as a TEI service. I know you've got people like Libby, who are paid private organisations who have an interest in the not-for-profit world. There's a number of us out there, but we're funded by the government to do research and evaluation. So come to us.
All right.
Yep, please. I'll put my phone number in there.
Thank you.
Okay, Katie, do you have anything? So what exactly with young people, what cohort are we talking about?
12 to 17-year-olds.
And what is their need?
They have multiple vulnerabilities and dropping out of school. We're looking at an employment pathway or apprenticeship pathway as a long-term goal, but we've got a whole lot more work to be doing.
Right.
And because COVID, probably everybody's experienced that, getting more and more disconnected. Very few resources to be at. Like when we put things on, it's really hard to gather them and connect. Like they're not a group. They're not you can't put on a big event and they all come. We've really got to drill down further into what's going on for these highly disadvantaged young people. And no resources, no infrastructure. So we're headed for a redevelopment and there's nothing in it for young people. So we want to get them, we want to get their voice heard, and we want to get services put in that are relevant for them, but it can't just be, here's a program, let's put it in. So we need to do some research.
Okay, I mean, flick me an email and I can look into it a little bit further. My contact details will be on the slides that will go out. So absolutely, flick me an email and I can see what we can do. Don't think I can give any definitive answers today. I don't have that authority, right?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, I was just about to say, Libby, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, look, what I wanted to say was that we worked with health to write a manual that is almost identical in terms of the content that's been presented here today. I'm really happy to send in the details. It was a research manual and it explained pretty much all that Katie's explained today in the context of the Royal Commission and Protection of Young People. Very relevant to what has happened today, and you may be able to access that and find similar information. It was very user-friendly, so it might be a helpful thing to also look up. And I think, Katie, I don't know whether you've been working with Jackie or others in health, but that would be a really great connection to make too, in terms of what you've been doing in DCJ and what they've been doing.
Sure, thank you.
Well, we have 3 minutes.
Yes.
And we're almost there. And I have been instructed to make sure that I spruik the next session before we finish today. So if anybody has a burning question or something, now's your moment before we call time.
Katie, just a quick one. How about the data that's going on in DCJ for the public to be able to access? So number of calls to link to home, or number of beds, people turned away, cost of beds, all that kind of stuff. Is that available on DCJ websites?
So a lot of it is available in our statistics page. So I've included all of the links to those pages in my presentation. So you'll receive
the link in the chat as well.
Oh, beautiful.
So,
thank you, Katie Blair. You're on top of it.
and how often are they updated? Because I know New York has got like almost a daily, weekly kind of how many people are in shelter on a particular night, or how many reports have been made on a particular day, and all kinds of things like that.
So no, I don't believe our data's updated that frequently. I would need to get back to you on that. I'm not quite familiar with when they're updated. I think our dashboards are done monthly, aren't they, Katie?
It depends on the data set. So there are some data sets that are updated quarterly, some 6 monthly, and some 12 monthly. It really just depends on the actual data set itself. But the link that I posted in the chat will take you to a whole bunch of information that will look for.
I put a note in, it's Margaret again, I put a note in the text before that the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare are putting out specialist homeless service data on a monthly basis. I've posted it on Westie's Facebook page if you want to link to that today. But Institute of Health and Welfare do fantastic stuff. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I've included all those links as well. So
There's quite a lot for you guys to sift through post-presentation today. So if I don't get a chance, thank you for joining in, and thank you for your patience whilst I dealt with my rambunctious 3 children. So yeah, the 12-year-old's babysitting duties, clearly he's not earning $20 for that.
Oh, I don't know.
I did try to do a bit of bribing. That's not very good, is it?
I think
anyway.
you need to incentivize the performance.
Yes.
Rather, yeah, thank you both very much. Thank you, Katie. And I just want to express my appreciation, the appreciation of NCOSS, everybody, people. There's a lot of support for your child being paid.
I noticed that. I won't share that, of course.
Yeah, and look, it was, you know, it was an enlivening session as a result as well. And in particular, what I was noticing in the chat were the tips on the searches, you know, and for taking us through some practical examples of the way that you assess things. Much appreciated. So thank you very much. And to everybody else who attended, thanks for showing up. And I hope you're all surviving and thriving doing as well as can be expected. Don't miss the next session. The next session is on the 15th of September, which is revisiting your theory of change. And I think Robin Miles is doing that. And I think that's all from us. So one of the things I'd like to do, if you want to come off mute for a second, you don't have to put your camera on, and just express our appreciation and say thank you to Katie and Katie's. And to one another, and have a lovely rest of the afternoon and a great week, everyone.
Everyone.